Here, the graph behind it, if I could get Joni and Brian to kind of just split a little bit here. Yeah. So this top line for all of you, and you guys have seen it, we've looked at this red line right here. This is our inventory. Okay. This starts back in March of 2019. We climbed a little bit, and then we have just slowly dropped. And so why are we here? This is why we're here. We're going to talk about inventory. We're going to talk about listings. And I want to give it up to these panelists, because every one of these panelists, first of all, some of them came to me and said, hey, I think we should talk about this. Okay. And so then my challenge to them is, will you help? And they absolutely, I'll help. Then I called them individually. And I mean this, guys. I called them individually and said, here's what we're looking to do. Will you get up and share some ideas and share your thoughts? And there was no hesitation. It was absolutely, how can I help? What can we do? This is the kind of office that we are. We get together, we share ideas, and we work together to build everybody up. So I'm really proud of you guys. I really appreciate all of you guys for coming out, and I thank you for your time and energy. For those of you who are joining us, because we do have some people from outside the office joining us on Zoom, this panel represents $350 to $400 million in sales last year. So these guys are the real deal. They know what they're doing. They sell a lot of real estate. And now I hope they're going to share some of their ideas with us. So Rick Dernberger has offered to be the moderator, so I appreciate him volunteering too. Thank you. So I'm going to turn it over to Rick.
Thank you, Bernie. And thank you, panelists, for being here. So first, I don't know why they call them housekeeping rules, but anytime I go to a presentation, they have like other stuff to talk about. They call them housekeeping items. So a couple things. So if you're online and have a question or a comment, please post it in the chat box. So if you're online, do not unmute yourself and ask a question. We don't have the technology to handle that very well. So just post it in the chat box. Bernie will kind of aggregate those, and as appropriate, he'll shout them out. And then I have a few questions to get us started, but we're hoping to have a lot of audience participation to drive the bulk of this discussion, right? So participation from you folks, and then you folks as panelists, if there's something that I asked, but you want to kind of take a little left turn and add something to that, or you want to answer a question I didn't ask, we're here to gain from you guys. If you're here in the room and have a question, feel free to jump in. If you have a follow-up question or a clarifying question, we want this to be kind of fairly interactive. If you do, though, we've got a microphone that I think works almost to the back of the room. So I'm going to raise your hand and I'll come over and hand the mic to you, just so the people on Zoom can hear. Otherwise, they're not going to hear the question. I think that's it. Let's see. I've encouraged the panelists just to be unabashedly themselves. I've told them that they don't have to answer every question. I've told them to answer even if it's counterintuitive. Like we all get trained one way, and if they've discovered a secret sauce that has nothing to do with the way we're trained, it's okay to answer that way. Panelists, if you need to step out of the room and get a drink or shake your legs or whatever, kind of move out about that, that's fine. Again, we're going to be very informal on this. We're planning on being done no later than 10:15. And if it naturally ends earlier, we'll end earlier. Okay, I think that's it. All right, so I'm going to name who the panelists are. Raise your hand when I say your name so that people who don't know you can know. We've got Dave DeYoung. Thank you, Dave. Joni Bauman. Brian Myrick. Leo Braha. Kyle Geenan. Lori Sisson. And we are supposed to have Andrea Crossman on Zoom. Do we have, okay, can we try and
I'm here.
Pin Andrea? If we pin Andrea, will that still not affect the Zoom broadcast, right? Or it will? Okay, all right. Then we'll just leave it as is. So Andrea, I'll ask the questions and I'll kind of pass the mic down the row here. And then Andrea, I'll either have you probably be the first to answer or the last to answer, just so that we have some continuity there. Okay, so again, I have some questions to get us started, but hopefully others will percolate. So the first question is, what if the seller is just not ready to list quite yet? you've talked to them, or they said, I want to sell my house someday, or maybe you've kind of gone over and told them what their house is, and then they sort of tell you, well, this has to happen in my life, or it's going to be a while. So my question is, how do you keep them engaged? How do you sort of incubate that? What do you do with that? And Lori, you blessedly get to be the first one.
Not every time, right? So
I will rotate for you. How's
Okay.
that?
So what was the question? No, I'm just kidding. So I think, especially right now, my biggest thing with people that are selling is finding out where they're going, because we're running into, not having a place to go. So my number one thing when meeting with somebody that's thinking about selling their home is making sure that they have a place to go right now. I mean, that was different last year.
That's an integral part of your discussion, because if they haven't thought about it, then what do you say, or how do you counsel them? Or
Well, if they don't, it keeps me awake at night.
Yeah.
So, that's really right now in this market, unless it's a cottage or something, we need to figure out where they're going to go.
If they don't have a place to stay, you are almost a little reticent to just say, we'll just list it and hope for the best.
Right. Because then you're going to end up with.
Yeah.
And if you've done that once. So, all right.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
How do you incubate people that aren't ready to sell?
So one thing I wanted to talk about today was I've had a couple people who they're like, hey, we want to sell. All of a sudden they, like maybe I find them something. Let's just say we end up finding them a home. But then they're like, oh, by the way, my friend's daughter is going to actually buy our house. So we don't need to list it anymore. So what I've been doing is getting them to sign a off-market pocket listing agreement. So I've called all my past clients, asked them if they're interested in moving this year. And I've had every single one of them who is interested in moving sign a pocket listing agreement. And that way, if and when we do find them the right home, they are already locked in with us. And then I have a list too of all these people, so I can look at it and be like, all right, these are the homes that are coming up. But I think the most important thing, like you said, is to find them a home, but actually make sure you actually get a listing signed first before they, because they're going to find somebody to buy it if you don't, right? So
I refuse to leave the house. I show up with a sleeping bag, a little toiletry sack, my pajamas, teddy bear, and I say, great, if you're not ready, I can wait. Kyle and Lori hit a couple of my points on the nose, so I have nothing.
Dave, you're next. Oh, can you hear me without this, or do I have to have this? Okay, sorry. They hit on a couple items, obviously, but I will put them on a little bit of a drip campaign as well. Make sure I have my follow-up taken care of, maybe like once a week, once every 2 weeks. Hey, have you gotten some of the things that we talked about done? Are you doing the paint? Are we doing the carpet? Are we following through on all those other items, whether they found a house or not? And it seems like by the time I send them a message, they've already thought about calling me anyway and just haven't done it. And it's so far, I mean, I have missed out on by not having maybe an agreement in place, which is kind of a bummer. I'd rather just follow up with them. And that's just kind of how I've done it. Sometimes we get lucky and sometimes we lose them. So.
Yeah, there's not much left, I guess, but I agree with everybody else that I definitely try to get the paperwork signed like right now if I can. And recently we've been talking about this delayed listing thing. So I think that's important to mention as well, that you do got to get that paperwork signed, which I haven't been doing, but I am now. So if I can get that paperwork signed, I definitely want to have that the listing signed, because basically they are going to sell it to somebody else, because it's just too easy right now. Trying to think, there was something else I was going to say there, but it's gone. So anyway, get the listing paperwork signed. Oh, the other point is I do put everybody on a just a calendar alert. So I touch base with them. If they're 6 months out, I'm going to put it like once a month just to say, hi, how you doing? If it's closer than that, then obviously, every 3-4 days or something, touch base with them. So definitely want to just keep in touch with them, or once again, you're going to lose it.
Hey, everybody. So last time I was in a situation like this, it was a lineup.
Yesterday?
Yeah. I'm just glad that they think that Dave and I look the same. I think everybody kind of hit it on the point, on the head. It's, it's listening to the customer. Like Lori said, it's, finding out what they're doing next, their motivations. Like, it's extremely important for us to identify that, so we can help them paint that roadmap to the next property. So, like, right now, most people are scared that they're going to be on the street, and that's a fair statement. Like, people sell their houses and then they have nowhere to go. Like, they're worried, so we need to be there to ease those worries. So, identifying that early on and creating a couple of solutions for them has been working out good. So, pretty much it.
Yeah, Joni has one thing that.
In the case where if you're out actively looking with someone, like Laurie said, get that listing as ready as you can, not just the paperwork, but have the photos taken, have everything done, have it staged, have the lockbox there. So the minute you find a house that you think you can win on, or that you do win on, their house goes active within an hour. And then obviously make it non-contingent, but especially the houses that we're listing are selling. So take a chance.
So something that I have used is this, and that would be our company, our Tuesday meetings, our wants and needs thing, even though I don't talk as much as I should. But some of it is, hey, we've got so many people here that can sell your house that if you decide to list with us, which I think you should, even if you don't get the paperwork signed, which you should, use the company, use the people around you, how good we are, our market share, and bump yourself up so that when they do continue to call you or you continue to call them, they feel more confident in waiting until you're ready to list it.
Thanks. Andrea Crossman, are you out there in Zoom land? If you are, unmute yourself. And what if a seller is not ready to list yet? How do you keep them connected?
Can everybody hear me, first of all?
We can't hear you.
Huh.
Maybe
Okay,
it's at
I'm
our
on a
end.
new map.
Hang on, Andrea. We're turning up the volume on our end here. We're trying to. Okay, try again, Andrea.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Oh, we still can't hear you. Hang on. Is she unmuted?
I can hear.
I tried.
People on Zoom are
I
saying they can hear. Okay, so it's something at our end with our speaker end. Okay, go ahead, Andrea.
I guess if not everybody can hear me, I'll stop shy, but
We can all hear you now. We've kind of got it fixed.
okay, good. Anyway, hi from Florida, sunny Florida. That's why I'm not there in person, but I always try to encourage people to list now because the market is so good and you just never know. Again, with all the thing that's going on politically around the world and stock market and all that stuff, I say, you're the one who's in control. If you don't have something already picked out now, I'll do my best to, hit any of those neighborhoods or whatever. We'll put out voicemails or emails to everybody at our company and see if they've got something for you. And you don't have to say yes, but how are you going to find a new home if you need to sell your home first? That's the tricky part. So list now.
Thanks. And Andrea, go ahead and mute. Yeah, Bernie. Okay, and then Andrea, while I've got you, I'm going to ask you the next question. You'll be the first on the next round since we kind of had that figured out. And the next question is, what if the home needs work, but they say they don't have the money or they don't want to fix it up? How do you handle that? Because quite frankly, you could probably sell a home in about any condition. So is it okay to just list it as is, or do you encourage them to front the money up front and charge them at closing? What are some solutions? And Andrea, go ahead, and Bernie's going to turn up the speed.
I personally have not used stagers all that much. I've had mixed reaction with stagers, including somebody who thought that I was going to pay for their painting of their entire house. They were in their 80s, but I think it totally depends upon the house. Some of the places I list are tear downs that somebody's going to really buy it just for the land. So it really depends upon each circumstance.
right, Leo will hand the mic to you and we'll go that way.
Okay, so as far as fixing the house goes, I don't know if most of you know this or not, but we started a construction company, and what we've been doing lately is that we will fix up the house for the client and hold the construction cost till closing. And that allows them to get more money for their house and be able to secure something better down the road. So we've done a few of those now, and they've worked out great, and we're gonna probably start doing more.
You do them yourself?
Correct. Well, not me personally, but like my people do.
I mean, you have a construction crew?
Yes.
Or is it all of you?
No, it's a construction. I mean,
So I too have a little construction crew that I use. I think anybody can get that set up with just making a contact with a handyman. But there's I use it as part of my listing presentation, because I would say somewhere around half of the homes that I end up listing do need some work, whether it's major or small. But I do the same thing where we hold the cost of that until we close. It also gives you the opportunity to get your listing paperwork signed if you start doing some work on their house. So a good way to get that stuff signed early. But I do the same thing where we just get in there and try to get some of the work done. I find that I think I've lost listings on this one too, where I walk through the house, give them a list of all the items that need to be done, and then follow up with them once a month, and nothing ever gets done. So the same way things have gotten done for the last 10 years they've owned the house. So it helps if you can get in there and take the bull by the horn, so to speak.
I have paid for some items before as far as repairs. A lot of the ones that I'm working with, they'll do it themselves. But I mean, Rick, you said at the front end, I walk in, I'll say, yeah, we could sell it like this. I could take a picture right now. Dave said it's a little bit, I don't want to say easy, but you're going to sell the house no matter what it is. But my kind of line is, let's run them out of excuses so that when they walk in the door, it's standing tall and you're sitting there with 10, 20, 30 offers, whatever it is. Let's get the maximize whatever money you're putting into it now, and we'll get it back hopefully 3 times more when you sell it.
Also offer a range. And I try to make sure that range as it's sitting right now is pretty darn low. But some people, like we said, just really want it to go right now. But offer a range and they say, here's this price, but all tricked out, you're looking at this much. And if you can find a way, people have some money under the mattress, or a parent, or they know someone, or they have friends who can help and get it all, like I said, all standing really tall, and make sure they understand that price is quite a bit different.
I created a construction company today, and I'm going to start doing what these guys are doing.
I don't know how I go from there. We do, I think all of you know that we work very closely with stagers. I have painters, carpet people, and my line is always, you get one chance to make a first impression. So I think it's a big deal. We have paid for everything before and just held it until close. So lots of ways to skin a cat.
Thank you. Okay, follow-up question.
People are asking online, how do you cover yourself? Do you have a contract you make them sign, or is it just a handshake?
Handshake. Yeah.
I mean, once you establish that relationship and once you start working on their house, they're pretty loyal to you, and they're probably going to go
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah.
Say it again.
So once you establish that relationship, and once you help out your client by fixing up their house, they're gonna stick with you, probably more than likely. Most of the time, we don't need a contract. I do have them sign something, just saying that, and because we have been there, we did one that like we ended up spending $50,000 because they remodeled the entire house, and then they were like, "Nah, we're keeping it," and we were out of like $50,000 for like 3 months, and we were like, "Oh, we're not doing that again." So we do have them sign something, and if they decide to keep it, they have to pay us immediately. So.
But isn't on the listing agreement, doesn't it say that if they cancel, they owe you? Right? Isn't there a line? Somebody help me.
It says something along that line.
Yeah. So any expenses that you've incurred if they cancel the listing, you know.
Okay. And we've got a little feedback to hold the microphone. Everyone, they can hear you if you got the microphone about this close. If it's right up in your face, it probably starts to modulate a little bit. If it's far away, so sorry about that, but just maybe about this close would probably be about right for everyone. So now I want to move into listing presentations, or what you say when you show up to talk to them. And I'm curious with you folks, because I'm guessing the vast majority of your listings are people that already know and love you and maybe repeat customers, or maybe have heard about you, or it's a referral. That's my assumption. You tell me if I'm wrong when it's your turn to talk. And then I myself, 6 years in real estate, struggle with what to do. I started out getting trained on this voluminous thing that I had to present, and I unfortunately just did it, kind of barfed at someone for like half an hour and their eyes rolled back in their heads. And so I did that for a few times. Then I kind of seesawed the other way and did kind of nothing and just sat down with a pad of paper and what are you guys thinking? So sort of a two-part question for you guys. Do you do anything? What do you do, with a listing presentation, if anything? But mostly, do you do something different for those that you already know you have the listing? Like they say, Lori, I want you to list my house. Can you come over? Do you do something different for that than if you know you're up against 3 other agents? Lori, sorry, you're the first one to answer this.
Can we start in the middle? I'm just remembering a time when Kirsch and I went, we totally thought we had the listing. We didn't think there was a question about it, and went in and with nothing, and they ended up listing with somebody else. So now I always go in, just depending. I mean, I think every situation's different.
Yeah.
So, you prepare differently for people that you know. So.
But okay, so here's what I'm gonna do this with each of you. So, like, do you have an actual thing you hand them? Do you deliver it in advance? Do you just have a list of what you go over?
Can you show us your listing presentation?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a partner for that. He's not here. Again, it's different for everybody, but we do have a very elaborate online presentation that we, take the computer and show it to them, email it to them. So.
Yeah. Kyle, do you do anything different for people that you don't love?
Similar situation. I've learned never to assume you've got the listing. And so I always do the listing presentation, to set expectation of what we're going to do or not do, but also to make sure that I earn their business, even if I think I have it. And I've also learned to take the listing agreement with me. And if it feels like the right time, have them sign it on the spot. But one of the things I've started doing is I'm a male, so I always try to take a female with me if I can, so that it's not just me and maybe an individual or a couple, but there's like a group of us, we have a conversation. It feels more natural. And then, we give a presentation and you kind of just feel it out as you're going. I don't always necessarily know what we're going to talk about, and find out what their questions are. And then just, you go after that. So.
I have a listing presentation. In the day, I had one of those big blue notebooks and I wore it out. Those were the best, and we used them like crazy. I have a whole different listing presentation now that's a lot smaller. I truncated it quite a bit, but I love the idea. If you hand somebody something, they will take it. That's a proven fact. So I want to hand somebody something when I walk in the door, something for them to keep, because like you both just said, I've done the same thing. I was sure I had it. I didn't bring anything with me except my smiling face, and I lost it to someone else. And that was just my own fault. I also make sure I hit on the points that are in my tool belt. And Brian hit on it a little bit ago, saying, I talk about this group. I talk about this huge team that we have and how we love to sell each other's listings. And there's a lot of power in the kind of information that we can hand out about the house we're about to list. In that tool belt, I talk about professional photography. People are starting to take their own photos. Shame, shame, shame. And you can tell every time that they're not professional because they're thinking, well, this is going to go really fast. But the professional photos are in my tool belt, the home warranty is in my tool belt, and Evolve staging is in my tool belt. And that's something I cover for people, not the whole bill, but the initial consultation. So those people are always in. And when we talk about how they can just move a chair or suggest some different things for the wall, they're all about it. And it's a great thing if you haven't done work with them. But those are things to try to hit on. And I always leave them with some statistics and then the brochure that I have about myself.
Listing presentation. I have one. I don't use it on everyone. Probably a little bit more assuming sometimes than I should. But I usually do it in 3 stages. Like I'll have a 3-step process, but I'm going to meet with them. And if I'm on my game, hopefully in step 2 or stage 2, I have it with me and they're like, well, when do we sign? And that's usually how it goes. Stage 3 is maybe it's a little bit longer and that's when I'll follow up with them. But hopefully I've built that trust and relationship like Leo talked about earlier, that and they like the fact that I'm directly involved in all of it, whether it's the pictures or it's me setting up the staging or doing all those things. So on that second step, I guess that's kind of how it goes. If I need to bring my listing presentation along, I will. But a lot of times it's referrals and past clients, and that's how it's always worked.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I think you have to, it's whether or not you're competing on the listing, I think is the big thing, right? If you are competing, you better go through your presentation for sure. With past clients or, somebody that I think I already have the listing, I will ask the question. I always drop off my material with them on the first, on the first meeting, ask them to walk through it. And I think they usually do because they'll ask me questions about, my brochure or whatever. But I do think it's important just to ask the question. If you're even thinking about whether or not I should go through the marketing presentation, ask them the question. Do you want me to go through my marketing presentation? So I just ask the question, and oftentimes they will say no. And usually that's a pretty good indication that you might get something signed.
I agree. I think we have a listing presentation. It's not great, but I think most of the time, 12 inches. I know what that's like. Most of the time, it's connecting with the customer. It's connecting with them on a personal level. So if you connect with them, like listing presentation goes right out the window. So if they trust you, they're going to use you versus a nerd that shows up with all his little gadgets and whatever. So, I mean, you'll remember that example, right? So, but building that trust is extremely important. Like if you build that trust, then like a lot of times, 9 out of 10 times, I would say you're going to get that listing because of that trust that you build with the customer. But you have to listen to them. You have to identify their wants and needs and make sure that they know that you are on their side. So,
Andrea, how do you handle listing presentations, you and your team?
I think we all do it a little bit differently, but we have been using the Moxie presentation that's available online. As a matter of fact, I think Kirsch went over the luxury presentation on Moxie, and it's available, I'm sure. But I usually email something ahead of time. I also sometimes do saturation analysis reports showing our market share for certain segments. But I don't rely on my listing agreements or our presentations that much. I usually wing it more or less.
Okay, Joni has one thing to add. Yeah, absolutely.
Don't be afraid to go into the place and be yourself and be the professional. So there's a little difference there, but be the professional in that you're ready to go to those places you don't want to go, the corner of the basement. You don't always want to walk into someone's closet. The things that freak you out at first become part of the game. My very first listing, I wasn't licensed yet. So I asked someone to go with me, and his name's Jack Bauman. And we walked into a house and it was on like Mac. It was a big listing for me. And he walked in and I thought, you know, he did have like a portfolio thing in his hand, and he kind of tossed it on the table and asked the guy to show us around. We walked down some steps past some exercise equipment that had beach towels and clothes on it. And he said, "Oh, I see you exercise a lot." And I was a little bit shocked, but it absolutely broke the ice immediately. The guy's like, "Yeah, I haven't used that thing in 5 years. You want it?" And so they have you there for a reason. And the reason is they already know you, love you, maybe not, but be yourself.
Okay, so this is kind of a related question, and that is, what if you know you're up against, you know, they tell you that you're one of 3, 4 agents that are being interviewed. Do you do anything different? Well, let me back up. And they say, why should I use you and not XYZ Realty? What's your answer to that? And Andrea Crossman, I'll have you go first on this one if you're up for that.
Sure. So yeah, I mean, I always assume that I'm up against other people. There's sometimes where I'm more confident that I'm not, but obviously, I think building the rapport while you're there. And if you get the question about, will you cut your commission? Of course, I try to answer that objection, but I also try to tell people that, you know, the market is what the market is, especially today, that if you list your house at $250, it might go for $325 as an example. So don't, you know, choose somebody who's giving you the highest price is one of my lines is, you know, hopefully with our marketing and our customer service and negotiation skills, we're going to do better for you than other less experienced agents.
Thanks, Andrea. All right, Leo, we'll start with you. So if you're asked a question, why you, why your team instead of somebody else, how do you answer that? And I know you can have a flippant, sarcastic answer initially, so go ahead.
Thanks for ruining it.
Yeah. You walk into that one.
Because we're badass. No, so I think that, you know, if we're competing, I don't think that I've been in many situations that we're competing with another agent. And maybe we were, and I just didn't know. But you know, if I'm competing, then I'm asking the questions like, who am I competing with? And if it's, you know, somebody from the office, then we'll talk them up and be like, hey, they're great agents too. Like, your house is gonna get sold, so whoever you hire, just hire who you like. So
I throw other agents under the bus. I definitely talk up the Coldwell Banker statistics. I talk up my statistics as well. But I would say for the most part, I really hone in on our market share. And I think that that drives things in the right direction quite often. The other thing is, if you know you're competing, spend as much time as you possibly can with them, because you really just got to build that rapport. So don't just try to get out of there as quickly as you can. If you can spend an hour with them and they're not throwing you out of the house, do it.
Well said. I lacked it in the beginning, maybe a little bit still now. Have some confidence when you're there. And I remember I walked in with Henry Patterson to probably my 6th listing appointment. I was like, oh, I'm getting this. And she almost beat me up when we left the door. She's like, what is wrong with you? And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. She's like, you're a real estate agent. Joni mentioned it. Be a professional. And along with, they have to like you, I think. You have to have trust. It's a big investment. So have some confidence in yourself. Use your abilities of what it is, but also you can use your statistics. And if you're still building those up, use them how you need to. You can make them work however you want to. So that's my 2 cents. Or 3.
Andrea well, my first question is, I got a text from someone in Zealand. Can they hear us okay now? There?
Is that better?
Okay. Okay, perfect. I just wanted to make sure. The things we talked about, yes. And then Andrea hit on the, will you cut your commission? Sometimes you just have to say, no. And don't say anything else, because whoever talks first loses. No, because, and don't go into a rattling explanation why you can't. No, I won't. And until we have an offer right here on the table, there's no commission to talk about. So let me tell you what I can do. Let's talk about this. We'll talk about that later, but no is a good answer as well.
That was good. Thank you. I would say I tend to learn things the hard way. And one of the things I learned the hard way was not to talk poorly about other realtors. I don't know if you actually do that or not, but not to say that you don't talk about, like, if you know, like sometimes they'll tell you, if they don't tell you, I actually ask who I'm competing against. I always want to know. And then I'll research their statistics, compare them to mine. But I do point out the differences between us, but I try to do it in a positive manner, definitely not in a negative manner. Because if you talk negatively of the other people, they're going to, I don't know, it just looks bad on you, I think. And I learned that the hard way for sure. So I think when I'm competing, that's what I do.
Yeah, I would agree with everyone 100%. I mean, you never want to talk bad about another agent. Your statistics are huge, and I don't know who said it. If you said it, I mean, there's a million ways to search and make it, either the office, if you're a newer agent and don't have your own statistics, use the office. So, use that word team, because it'll help you. It'll help launch you. So I can't remember what else we were talking about.
You're fine. You're fine. All right. This one, I gave them the questions in advance. I asked, tell us a story or two about the time you blew it. And some of you have already kind of shared some of that. So if you want to say, I just did and I'm past or whatever, that's fine. But it helps us. We all learn from our mistakes, and we'd love to learn from your mistakes if you're willing to share any. So is there a time in the listing side that you just, I'm not going to do that again?
Well, I talked about one a little while ago that Kirsch and I walked in and thought we had this. But then we had this summer, we were at a property on Lake Mac, and I bet you that we were there almost 2 hours, and we kind of walked out of there, knew that we were competing against Ron Webb, and I don't know who else, but Kirsch and I vowed to each other in January of 2019 that if the phone rang and you cringed, that we weren't going to work with everybody. So, and I think, especially in this day and age, that's really hard, but be true to yourself. I mean, we walked out of there and he was like, that's 2 hours we'll never get back in our lives. We're going to cringe every time this phone rings. But our mistake was that we went back. And while we were sitting there, Ron Webb sold the house. The phone rang. He answered the phone. We had the paperwork with us. It had gone to his attorney and been, all diced up. And we sat there for another 2 hours. And I think be true to yourself. When you have that gut feeling, I don't care if it's a buyer or a seller. I think it's really important. So
I know who you're talking about.
and maybe I was competing against Kyle there as well. But.
Actually, unfortunately don't know of a lot of times that I've lost out on a listing, but recently I did to Kirsch and Lori, actually. I don't know if you know this or not, but there was a house it's like a $400,000 house in West Olive. This gal calls me out of the blue and she's like, hey, we've seen your stuff online. We know who you are. And I'm like, awesome. Like, this is an instant listing. I went in the door, wasn't very well prepared. And then apparently I showed up late. I don't actually know that I showed up late, but they thought I showed up late. And so that immediately threw me off. And I just kind of went into it like I had this in the bag, left. Later, all of a sudden I see it's listed. I'd never heard back from them. And then I find out they listed it. And I think some of that just had to do with the overconfidence, if you will.
You?
Never.
This goes way back, but I blew it so big and bad. A friend of mine said, hey, my sister is going through a divorce and I would like you to go list her house. You have the listing. She trusts you because I do. And this friend of mine is meticulous, just meticulous. So I got my information together. I used all of the high priced listings. She lived in Marigold Woods and had a whole CMA and the whole thing ready, walked in the door and handed it to her with all my pricing in it and such. And I could hardly get in the door for starters. She was a hoarder. The ceiling was falling in the foyer. And the husband she was about to not be married to anymore was a big time gamer. And there were gaming consoles all over and chairs and blackout curtains and fake walls made with blackout curtains. And I gave her paperwork, which I kept trying to get back. Hey, can I see that a minute? She was like, no. She just wasn't, I didn't want to be that obvious, but like she was a teacher and the dining room table was piled with like the last 3 years stuff, the end of the school year. And so I walked in and gave a price that was so high. And then I had to list it. I did talk her down a little and I came clean and said, hey, I just thought the house would be in better shape. And I was very honest and she started crying. And, you know, she knows that. That's why she doesn't want to be married anymore. But helped her get it cleaned. Hell, it was awful. It was awful. So never hand over the numbers. I listed it, got it down a little bit, but then it was in the days when things were listed, 90, 100 days on market. So each 3 to 4 weeks, we just kept reducing it. And then I used that line that someone said, the market is screaming at you that this isn't the right price for your house. And I took the fall as well and said, hey, I know Sissy so well. And I thought, and she's like, yeah, we're just opposites. And so I came clean as well, but we did get it sold for about $75,000 less than I had told her.
I think I remember that one. Yeah. Well, I gave you one earlier. I'll try to make this one short. I did not get the listing sold, but it's one that you don't always remember the ones you didn't get. It's the ones that you had and didn't sell. So that's what this one was. And so I fell into that whole thing as well about buying a listing. I'm like, whatever he wants to list it for, that's what I'm going to just put it on the market for. And this is before you could just choose your price. So anyway, so I put the house on the market. I did all this that I usually do. He was a referral from a past client. And we were on the market for like 4 weeks. He's like, Brian, we got to sell this house. I'm like, well, let's drop the price. He said, no. I said, okay. I didn't fight him on it and I should have. So we got a little bit further down the line and he caught me off guard. He said, I think we got to dissolve our agreement. I said, oh, I'm like trying to figure out what I did. I still don't know. But the point of the story, and I'll never forget it, was I said, you know what? You don't want to work with me anymore. That's always what I say in my listing presentation. So he canceled the listing and I went back the next day to go get my lockbox. And they had already listed it with Teresa Sprick, actually. And she called me. She goes, hey, Brian, is your lockbox still in the house? And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to get it today. Okay, cool. Well, there's a buyer going there. Could you let them in? True story. I pulled up, took the lockbox off the door, handed the key to the buyer's agent, and it went pending the next day with that agent.
What was the
less money was, and obviously, but I still don't know. I mean, obviously it was that, but I will never forget it. I remember I handed the key and I go, this doesn't feel right. And it hurt even worse the next day. So anyway, that's the one I remember forever.
Well, this is going to be super contradictory to what you just said. But I have lost more listings in competitive situations because I'm being super honest about what I think they're going to get out of the market. And I always present more of a worst case scenario than a best case scenario. And a lot of that goes with, getting their whole story. Where are you going to? Let's give you a solid number that we know we're going to get out of the house. If you get more, you're always going to be way happier, right? So I really work to create a success story and not a failure story. And it does cause me to lose some listings in competitive situations where other agents, if you want to say, bought the listing. They might have bought the listing, but I bought nothing. So I especially in this market, I think it's not a horrible idea just to maybe push a little bit higher on that number, because guess what? They're probably going to get something more than what you're listing it for anyway. So I think it depends on the market, of course, but I don't think it hurts to throw a little, I hate to say it, but put a little fluff on it, because at least you have the chance to sell it, right? If the other agent gets it, you don't have the chance anymore. So I don't think it hurts right now in this market to go a little higher than what you're anticipating. Doesn't mean you can't eventually try to talk them down into saying, look, if we list it slightly lower, you're going to get more people looking, you're going to get more offers, and use that strategy in the end. But I don't think it hurts to start telling them just to squeak higher on the number.
So I actually got mad listening to your story, Brian. I'm like irritated now.
Me too, for like 10 years.
All the work we do. Oh, 12 inches. So I think I would probably piggyback on Joni's story. I think one of the worst situations is that I walk into a house and they call me, hey, we want to list our house, and I ask him the address, and I kind of look up the house a little bit, and I try to get him excited to get the house in the market, and I kind of prep him for a number, and I show up and I'm like, shit, like nowhere close. So then you have to backpedal, and then like 75 grand of backpedaling later, you're like, man, that was just not the right call. So I think being prepared, I think when I do a listing not a listing presentation, but when I do a listing, typically I try to do 3 steps, and I go to look at the house first before I commit a number. Once I look at the house, then I give them just enough information to want more, but gives me time to actually properly price the house. And then I go back the second time, get the house ready, and third time to sign everything. So, but yeah, I think those situations are pretty upsetting.
Yeah, please.
One other thing, if you are going to take an overpriced listing, because it's the seller's number, get the price reduction signed in writing at the time and set up a game plan. In 2 weeks, we're going to lower it to this. In a month, we're going to lower it to this, but have that in writing. And a lot of times you'll never use those if you do get an offer on it, but it's good to have them in writing.
Thank you. All right, let's start talking. Sorry, Andrea. Sorry. I cannot let you not have an opportunity to tell us about a time that you blew it. So what's a time that sometime in your career you did something that you said, I will never do that again?
I've been at it 30 years, and I can't tell you how many times I say that. We could all write books about all the, wish I could take that back. One of the bigger ones I lost, I know, I didn't do much due diligence on, and I had somebody else on my team meet me there because I had a conflicting appointment. And so I actually kind of showed up late, did not realize it was about a $4 million listing. So not prepared, not good.
Andrea, I don't know if you can hear me out there, but we got cut off. So if you could start over, what would you do differently, or when's the time that you've blown it?
Oh, I said after 30 years, I've got way too many stories. One of my bigger stories was just not doing enough due diligence and sending somebody else on my team and showing up late for about a $4 million listing.
Okay. The next question, Andrea, while we still got you, I'll ask objection. So I'm going to drop down to the second objection. So what if someone says, do I even need a realtor? I'm thinking of selling the home by myself. How would you answer that, Andrea?
Today's world, I think it's much easier because, of course, with the multiple bids, I don't honestly believe that somebody by an owner, even in a softer market, is going to get as much as they can with the realtor. But in this market, if all they're getting is one offer and they don't get competing offers, they're probably losing a fair amount on the table.
All right, so Leah, we'll start with you. So someone says I want to go for sale by owner. I'm thinking doing that. Why should I even use a realtor? Anything you would say?
I laugh, like, go for it. No, yeah. So when we get that objection, I typically use an analogy of like, hey, if you were to break your foot, you more than likely can fix it yourself, and you're gonna walk with a limp for the rest of your life, and it's just gonna hurt and remind you every time that you walk with the limp that you should have just hired an attorney. So like, somewhere along those lines that, we're professionals. We do this on a daily basis, and yes, you can do it yourself, but there are consequences to mistakes. So if you're okay living with those consequences for the rest of your life, go for it. Otherwise, we can list it and more than likely get you more money for your house than what you think it's worth. In this competitive market, it's not just about selling the house, it's about getting the most for it, because you need every cent you can to get to your next house. And multiple offer situations, knowing what to look out for as far as appraisal gaps and kinds of financing and things like that. Like, you need a professional to really guide you with those things. So, but it really depends on the client. Like, if it's an engineer, then I have a spiel. If it's a, salesperson, then I have a different spiel. Everybody kind of connects at a different level. So, but yeah, pretty much it.
I'm just going to take Leo with me to listing presentations from now on. I mean, pretty much what everybody's kind of thinking, I think, is that if you put it for sale by owner right now, you might get an offer. If you put it online with a real estate agent, you're probably going to get multiple offers. In which scenario do you
Everything they said. I actually had this with that 52nd Street listing you saw that I got 21 offers on. And I showed up last night, and I'm not very good at spreadsheets, so instead I just do my little Myrick style, which is get it all listed on here and show them my little formula, appraisal gaps, escalation clauses. And we had talked about this at the front end, and I said, they mentioned it. They're like, what do you think? And I'm like, do you want to do it yourself? Maybe we should. I'm like, you might want to do that, but before you do, you guys should move out of your house because you're going to get a lot of showings. He's like, well, what do you mean? I said, well, you're probably going to get a steady stream, at least a couple a day. And he looked at me when I walked in the door last night, and he goes, oh my God. He goes, I am so glad that you talked me out of getting out of that house, fixing it up like we talked about, moving into the new one. He's like, I never would have dreamed that we would have got as high as we did. And he said, it's because of us. I mean, he said me, but like, I agree with these guys. You're going to get a value out of it. It's easier to sell probably now just because you can almost say you can cover the cost and more. But even when the market is not good, I've never seen a market that they don't need an agent. It could be good, middle, and high, and we usually bring more value. So that's my thought.
Take that spreadsheet along that you've had from a listing that you recently listed, and use it as a story. Here, these people didn't want to list with an agent either. But look, we had 17 or 34, however many offers you have on this house, and they ended up 30,000 over cash or whatever it is. And then they'll realize that they may not be as well equipped as they think they are to list their own home.
I think in this industry, we always have to provide value. Like, people need to know what our value is. So I build into my listing presentation the value add of getting them way more exposure than I do it as other real on their own, and giving them examples of that, like you just mentioned, having stories prepared to share with them for sure.
Ditto.
Fair enough. Nope, fair enough. I have one final question I want to ask these folks, but we've just got a few minutes left. So is there any questions, Bernie, that you think we should ask or from the group? Yeah.
So, all right. So for me, and it's something that we're running into quite a bit. You have 30 different offers, and you have contingent offers. And obviously you had the situation where Vicky's not here. No. But it's like Reload will not accept a contingent offer. For me, the contingent offers are probably the strongest, and people always look at them as the weakest. A buyer always has the ability to back out or during the transaction. If it's contingent, they're going to be homeless. They're going to do every situation possible to make it happen, whether appraisal doesn't come in, inspections are bad, or if they're waiving inspections, all of a sudden there's a flooded basement. They've already sold their house. So they're going to do anything they can because they're going to be homeless to purchase this house. I always look at contingent offers as probably the strongest. How do you guys look at contingent offers? On sale, yeah, sale of a house.
So rather than have everyone ask that, is there anyone who wants to tackle that one? How do you look at contingent? Raise your hand. I'll bring the microphone over to you. Yeah.
No, I say I agree. Like it's somebody that's contingent. A lot of times they get pushed to the bottom of the list because they're contingent. But to Manny's point, it's, you know, those are the people that are highly motivated to making the deal work. So I had random stuff come up before on a transaction where they are contingent, and they're going to do everything and anything in their power to make sure that transaction closes. So as you're going through offers with your sellers, just know that contingent offers are not always the worst. They sometimes, or most of the time, are the best.
I don't really have a lot of experience here. I don't think I've gotten contingent offers.
I'll hit on it. I disagree. I don't disagree with your points. I just don't know that it's the best. But I did take one last week, but it was cash. And we had 6 or whatever it was, and it was cash. And I said, man, I'm like, I've seen that house. I think it's going to sell. And Bernie actually helped me with it because and asked for help, by the way. I mean, we've all been doing it for a while, but we all still have questions. Different note. But Bernie and I talked about it. I'm like, what do you think? And he goes, well, what do you have in the backup? I'm like, I don't know. I'm thinking we got to have at least a mortgage pre-qualification to switch it over afterwards. So it is going to sell. So I disagree, but I also see your point as far as how motivated they are. And that's how I would look at it, I guess.
I have a contingent on closing or contingent on sale and closing? Yeah, I disagree.
Any other questions? I've got one. We only have 2 minutes left, and I don't mean to cut you off, but I'm cutting you off. My final question is when someone asks you to drop your commission or to come in with a smaller commission. Joni, you already answered that, and Andrea already answered that in different pieces of it. So do any of you do other Joni just said you say no. Andrea has sort of an explanation of how it could be really beneficial. Do any of you handle that question in any other way than those two?
Give it to Dave. You're the best at it.
So that question definitely does come up, especially right now, I think, because people are like, well, you're putting my house on the market for 2 days and we get an offer. What are you really doing, right? So I think the best way to handle that right now is to say, look, I always say I will negotiate. If it comes down to it, I will negotiate. And usually what I say is, if I get you less than what I'm telling you I'm going to get you for your house, then I'll talk about, lowering the commission. But if I get you more than we're saying we're going to get for your house, I think I should get paid for that, don't you? And they always say, well, yeah, that makes sense. And here's the other thing I'll say about that is, whenever you say, yes, I will flex on my commission, you never talk about it when an offer comes in. And I'm not saying I won't talk about it. I'm saying it never comes up. You're always negotiating, and it rarely comes up about the commission. So if I'm competing, I will talk about flexing on the commission. If I know I'm getting the listing, then it's more of Joni's answer where I just say no.
Anyone else want to answer that question?
You also charge 7% if I can.
Good job, Dave.
Okay, let's wrap it up. Thank you to the panel. Appreciate it very much. Thanks for everyone joining.
I'll say one, since I'm a panelist, I get to say something. So I just want to say for the newer agents that just started or are new in your careers, understand this. Most of us are 20 years in, and we're still trying to figure out the market. So you guys coming in, you're trying to figure out the market, so are we. We're in the same boat. So we understand real estate process, but market changes continuously. So don't give up. Like it's hard, but we're all dealing with the same.
Get closer to it. Yeah.
Thanks again. We are adjourned.
Oh, there.